everybody can grab a seat, please, and we'll get going. It's now 7 o'clock. We'll wait for everybody to get comfortable here. A great big welcome. Thank you for coming. I remember when the school was built back, I guess it opened in 1969, we called it the new school. I guess it was 1968 open, so it's 56 years old now. Anyway, welcome. We want to thank you to Royal School for hosting us. We want to thank the Quadra Cedar Association. We want to thank the candidates for coming. Thank you. And especially we want to thank all of you for coming. You're showing interest in your community and supporting your democracy. So thank you so much. These are so important. We want to recognize and acknowledge the Quadra people, represented by the Swan Swan Nations, and the Wasanish people, represented by the Sartlet, Algonquin, the Sawat, Sakem, and Malhan Nations, on whose traditional territories we live, we work, and we learn. Housekeeping stuff. Washrooms, top of the stairs, you see it right away, right across the hallway. And Margaret will be right there to point you out if for any reason you can't see them. I guess we should introduce the candidates. You didn't come here to listen to myself and Susan. Susan Haddon is the president. I'm John Schmuck. I'm the past president of the association. So together we've been presidents and past presidents for 14 years now. So any volunteers? Anybody eager? I'll be repeating that part at the very end here. Okay, rules for the debate. So each candidate will allow 3 minutes each for an introduction. Susan will be posing the questions. So we have a timer down here. So Chris Bartlett has 2 different cards. One is a yellow card. That means 15 seconds left. The red card means 30? Okay, 30 seconds left. You clear? Red means you're done. I'll be yelling something in the mic. So you get 3 minutes to answer each question, 3 minutes of introduction, I believe I said, and 3 minutes to close each. Considering we're supposed to have had three candidates here, and I guess I haven't told you the news. Susan, do you want to mention about the Conservative candidate?
Yeah, I apologize on his behalf. We talked to him this morning about 10:15, and at 10 to 6, I got a text message saying it looked like he wasn't going to be able to be here tonight. I expressed our...
He confirmed this morning?
He confirmed this morning, and he texted at 10 to 6 to say, Tim Taylor is the Conservative candidate. I, on your behalf, said I think that the audience would be somewhat frustrated not to have a chance to hear from him and question him, and if he could do anything to get around whatever his conflict was, we would really like to have him here. So, not arrived yet. I don't suppose he's going to be here. I didn't hear back. So, on his behalf and on our behalf, I'm sorry that he's not here.
Do we know, because he's still not registered with Elections BC, so is he still intending to run?
Anyhow, Susan said that much more nicely than I would, so thank you, Susan. We don't know. So
Okay,
we spent a long time tracking him down. We tracked him down about 2 weeks ago. He agreed to come, and Susan explained what things happened since. So that's what it is. The candidates who have approached, we have Christina Winter with the Green Party. And I'm pretty sure you know by the color she's wearing which person she is. Right? And we have Nina Krieger with the NDP party. I forgot up, there was one more rule that we're supposed to be announcing at the beginning of the meeting. This is for you folks in the audience. I know all of you want to be respectful, and we're asking you to just be polite and respectful and honor the fact that these folks are here, and don't yell at the moderators out of place. Thank you. I had written very strong notes down here that brevity and clarity are admirable virtues, but I think we have extra time to take for questions tonight, so we may be lenient in some cases. But I think we're ready for some questions now. Oh, and folks, we do have a videographer up at the very back, so if any of you are objecting it, I'm just letting you know. It's valuable for us to show the people who cannot attend tonight. We'd like to start with the introductions, and consider she arrived first, Christina Winter.
Thank you, John. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and thank you again to the Quadra Cedar Hill Community Association for putting on this all candidates debate. I really
Turn it up a little bit. Not very well.
Is this better?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to start again. Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here tonight, and I wanted to again thank the Quadra Cedar Hill Community Association for hosting this all candidates debate. I had no idea that I was interested in political science at all until I found myself studying at Camosun College with Ross Lamberson, who had a way of putting it, because anytime that somebody would ask him a question, he would say, well, it's all very complicated. And then we would start to dive into the nuances, and it really opened up my mind, because when I grew up in Canada looking down south, it seemed really safe and boring here. And then as I started to have my eyes and my mind opened up, I looked around and realized that actually there's a lot of injustice here. There's a lot of inequality, and there's a lot of ways that we could be doing better. And I decided to dig in a bit. But it really wasn't until Elizabeth May walked into one of my class, like many, many students here in Victoria have had her do, and that was in 2011 while I was at UVic. This was the first time that I had heard a politician in Canada talking about doing politics in a way that made sense to me. Because she was talking about serving people, putting your constituents first, but most importantly, working across party lines to get things done. That stuck with me. I decided to vote for her. And when I voted for her in 2011 and she was elected, that was the first time that I really felt that my vote counted and I got what I wanted. And it inspired me to get more involved. So I decided to get involved with green campaigns. And for the past 12 years, I have been working on campaigns at every level of government, municipal, provincial, federal, internal, even within the party. I have been knocking on doors in Victoria, Swan Lake since 2015. And I have heard from all of you time and again what you are looking for. A progressive representative, someone who is going to advocate to government on your behalf, and someone who's also going to follow through and make sure that we get results. This is the difference that BC Greens make, and this is what we bring to the table, because since we have been in the legislature, we have changed the conversation and the issues that are being raised. There are no longer just two parties arguing at each other and talking about how the other one is terrible. We actually have a third voice that's bringing people together, that is working for the future, and that is making big changes, like banning big money in BC politics, reforming professional reliance so that we can protect communities and watersheds.
Could you just wind up, Christina?
Thank you all.
Next we have Nina Krieger from the AVP.
Good evening, and thank you to the organizers, to all of you for taking time for this important gathering this evening. I'm truly honored to be your candidate for MLA for Victoria Swan Lake. I'm especially honored to be here in Reynolds Secondary, which is a powerhouse of robotics and sporting, and that is the high school of former Premier John Horgan. And my thanks also to the moderators for acknowledging the territory on which we're gathered gratefully. And I think it's such a pleasure and so important to come together this evening to talk about key issues and to talk about our visions for this province as people cast their advance votes and get ready to visit the ballot boxes on October 19th. I believe that this is a critical election at a critical time for British Columbia, which is why I'm motivated to run. I am a mother of a 6-year-old child, a daughter of aging parents, and I've been a community leader and builder for more than 20 years, dedicated to building a more just and inclusive society where we can all thrive. My favorite thing, I think, so far about being a candidate is being able to connect with you, listen to you, and learn from you at the doors. People have been so generous with sharing insights about their challenges, their concerns, their hopes, and aspirations. And what I've learned is we all want the same things. We want help with the costs of everyday life. We want to be able to access quality health care whenever we need it. We want to be able to count on services from childcare to long-term care. We all want to be part of a strong, secure, prosperous, and caring communities. And I've also heard that you're looking for a champion for this vision, and this is what I'm committed to doing. I've seen the BC NDP take action in response to the challenges of our time, building the homes we need, hiring more doctors and nurses, and helping families afford basic affordabilities. And we have started to see real results, and there is so much more work to do, which is why I'm proud to be running with the BC NDP and advancing a people-centered vision for our province. I believe that now is not the time for cuts to programs and services. Now is not the time to cancel initiatives that are starting to make a difference for British Columbians. Now is not the time to question climate change or to advance conspiracy theories. We want to start to keep doing the work that we've been doing and make a difference to all people in British Columbia.
Thanks. One thing I forgot to mention, folks, if I could ask everybody to silence your cell phones, and I don't think anybody's run yet, but I've been embarrassed personally in the past, so you all oblige us. Thank you so much. Susan Haddon, our president, she'll be posing the questions.
Thanks very much, John. And so I just wanted to also say that we invited you to send us questions that we would embed with our questions from the board, and then we're going to open the mic so you can ask your own questions that will arise or that are burning or that we have not included in our sets of questions once we finish the set of questions we have. So you don't have your chance. We're also interested in having a runner that would grab the mic from us and take it to somebody in the audience so they can raise their question. So if there's somebody who'd like to volunteer as a runner at the end of this, that would be really helpful. So great, here we go. So the questions are going to be posed, and I'll alternate. I'll go to Nina first, and then I'll go to Christina first. They have exactly 3 minutes to answer, but if you don't need the whole time, you don't need to take it. So our first question has to do with housing. We're currently in a housing crisis, and there's both a lack of supply of housing options, and housing of all types has become unaffordable. What solutions do you recommend to increase the availability and affordability of housing? Nina first.
Thank you so much for this question. And this has to be the question I probably hear about the most alongside healthcare, and is one of the biggest challenges that our communities face, especially for people that would like to spend the entire sort of cycle of their lives in one place. We have grandparents that are worried about their children and their grandchildren moving away, and there's a real need for affordable options for all people. And so this is why I'm very proud of the BC NDP with a very robust action plan to tackle this issue. We've seen a speculation tax that has ensured that 20,000 homes that were empty have turned into long-term rentals. We've seen restrictions on Airbnbs that has moved short-term rentals into long-term rental stock, and that we have started to see real results bringing down the costs of rents. And critically, we have an action plan that will build 300,000 new homes for the middle class. These issues with housing were not short-term in the making, and they're not going to be short-term in the solution. But we have a government committed to taking action on housing in a multi-pronged way and making a difference for the people that want to live and make their lives here. Now, this contrasts so starkly with the record of John Rustad and the BC Conservatives, who have said that they will rip up David Eby and the BC NDP's housing plan. And this would mean fewer housing for the middle class. This would mean fewer rental housing, fewer rental units with if the Airbnb restrictions and the speculation tax are curbed back. And I believe that this is a risk that we as communities where we want all people to be able to live and thrive can afford. And I'm very proud to be part of the NDP that are committed to advancing our plan to work on these issues. There's more work certainly to do, but we're committed to doing that work.
Thank you, Nina. Do you need me to repeat the question, Christina?
No, thank you, Susan, I'm good.
Okay.
Plans and figures and numbers are things that I have heard a lot of before, and when I talk to people on the doorstep, I still hear a lot of people in our community that cannot find affordable housing. And that means renters who can't find places to rent, homeowners who are struggling to stay in their house or who are forced to move. When I talk to people, I hear so many struggles from every generation. So when I talk to my peers, I have a lot of friends who have been rent evicted repeatedly over the past years. What we see is, rent eviction after rent eviction, and every time that they go to move, they find that their rent has increased, not by, their amount of inflation, but significantly, hundreds of dollars. And this is something that I've experienced myself. I mean, living in this neighborhood, actually, when I was a young working person, we moved into one unit and found the old lease, 9 months old, and found out that we were paying $150 more a month in rent. And I was pretty sure that no changes had been made. So this is exactly a long-term problem in Victoria, and it is one that successive governments have failed to act adequately. And we know that there are things that we need to do immediately to address affordability, as well as just building more housing stock, because unfortunately, we can't build houses fast enough to keep rents affordable. So we need to act and have real rent control in British Columbia. Right now, we only have rent control within a tenancy, so if you're a tenant and you stay in a place for a long time, your rent is, only increasing the amount of inflation. But if somebody leaves, it's up to the landlord to decide what the next person pays. We need to make sure that it's regular, stabilized, real rent control, vacancy control for all residential properties in British Columbia, so that it's the same in between tenancies. That's something that we can do immediately. The BC Greens actually already proposed this legislation this February and said, why don't we just change the Residential Tenancy Act now? Act now, because people need help now. And unfortunately, that bill was not called by the NDP government, and we did not make that legislative change, but we know that we can do it immediately in the next session. The other thing that we need to do on the supply side, we need to make sure that public land is for public housing. We don't need to be talking about, what is exactly below market, what kind of numbers make things affordable. The only thing that matters is what people earn, real incomes in the area, and making sure that people that live, work in our communities can afford housing, whether they are renters or homeowners. So BC Greens want to make sure that instead of allowing a profit model to come in, enticing for-profit developers to come and use public land, get all kinds of tax breaks to make a profit, that we actually take that public land, we make sure that non-profit developers are able to access it, that non-profit housing providers are able to manage it over the long term. This is exactly the same plan that Stratas do. This is why residential real estate is such an enticing thing, is because people need housing, so it's a good investment. It should be a good investment for government and for non-profits as well.
Thanks very much, both of you. So now the first question goes to Nina. It's about health care. Our healthcare system is under extreme pressure. There's shortage of family doctors and other health professionals, long waiting lists for diagnostic tests and for appointments to see a specialist, and our emergency rooms are overcrowded. How would you address these healthcare challenges?
Thank you, Christine. You said me.
Sorry, did I say? Sorry,
said-
Christina is first.
We're trying to alternate.
Sorry, I have alternating, I have to say Christine.
I'm sorry, so I'm gonna ask you to repeat the question.
Sure. Our healthcare system is under extreme pressure. There's a shortage of family doctors and other health professionals, long waiting lists for diagnostic tests and for appointments to see specialists, and our emergency rooms are overcrowded. How would you address these healthcare challenges? Next.
Thank you so much for the question, Susan. This is something that impacts everybody in this community. It's impacted my family, and it's impacted so many people that I talk to on the doorstep in community meetings, because primary care is the way that we access our healthcare system. You know, it's something that we've been so proud of in Canada for so long, is having healthcare, and yet what we are finding now is that the gaps are growing, and that healthcare is struggling, and that we've been not listening to experts on the ground for far too long. These are not new challenges. These are all solvable problems that doctors and nurses have been telling us how to solve for a long time. We really need to make sure that we focus on healthcare professionals. I can take the example of my colleague Camille Curry. Many of you may have seen the signs around Victoria, everybody deserves a family doctor. That's her advocacy that got that on people's lawns and in front of the legislature, and raising this issue to show that we really have this drastic need for primary care in our community. We've seen initiatives that have started to show some results, in that we're happy that there is a model for physicians that allows them to practice family medicine without also having to run a small business. There's a lot of doctors that we're hearing from who aren't prepared to be a small business person on top of practicing medicine. We want to make sure that those skilled healthcare professionals can practice healthcare. And the model that we see as being extremely successful, and one that has been, shown as being one that works in other places, is a dogwood model, where we have community health centers, where the healthcare practitioners themselves can build teams, deliver healthcare that works for their communities, and make sure that you have access because you live in a community. It's sort of the same as having a school catchment area. You know that when you move into somewhere in Victoria, Swan Lake, you've got a place to go where you can access a doctor, a nurse practitioner, a psychologist, because we really need to make sure that mental health care is also included in our healthcare system. This is something that we want to make sure is rolled out, because the model that we've been trying, the urgent primary care center model, has just been mired in bureaucracy. I've heard a lot of complaints that it's a lot of red tape, that doctors are assigned based on seniority, rather than assigned based on who they can work well with, and it's just, it's not enticing people to work there. It's also pulling people away from other parts of the healthcare system, whereas doctors who are trying to create community health centers, our leader Sonia First now has been working with doctors in Cowichan who for 10 years have been trying to get the healthcare authority to let them practice medicine. These are things that we can change, and we can change quickly, and they need to change urgently for everyone in our community.
I think I'm good, thank you very much. And this, again, alongside housing, is the issue I hear about the most on the doorstep, and has touched my family personally. I've grown up in a household touched by chronic illness, by mental illness. And when I was pregnant, my husband suffered a life-threatening emergency and was saved because of the public healthcare system. So I know how much this matters for people to be able to access affordable and accessible and quality care whenever we need it, from visits to doctors to critical life-saving interventions in the ERs. This is why the BCNDP's plan is really getting at the root of challenging getting at the challenges of our time. We have seen hiring of new doctors and nurses, 175 in recent months in the Island Health region alone. This has attached more than tens of thousands of patients to urgent primary care. We're fast-tracking the process for health practitioners with foreign credentials to be able to practice here. We're building a new medical school at SFU, the first new medical school in BC in more than 30 years. And we're really addressing some of the issues in the healthcare system that have been exacerbated and laid bare by the pandemic. All these things are desperately needed, and there's so much at stake with the BC Conservatives and their vision for healthcare in BC that we've recently heard would mean $4 billion in cuts to healthcare. I know there is much more work to do to keep hiring doctors, to keep advancing work on community-based health centers, but I know we can't go in the directions proposed by the BC Conservative Party. I also am very proud of the investments made by the BC NDP in our own community. The Gorge Urgent Primary Care Center and the Luther Court Healthcare Center are really beacons of progressive, integrated care models that offers a range of supports, from mental health supports to also preventative medicine. My father needed urgent care that he couldn't access a family doctor for, and called the Gorge Primary Health Center at 8 a.m. to get an appointment at 10:30 and got extremely robust care. And I've had the privilege of talking to a number of physicians there who have moved to BC from Ontario and came specifically to work at the Gorge Urgent Primary Care Center because of the progressive integrated model that it offers. We need more of this, not less of it, and we're proud to keep doing the work.
Thanks very much, and now it's your turn first, Nina. So it's a question that we received from one of our members, and it is to do with education. Current provincial legislation requires school boards to pass balanced budgets. Do you support this legislation? And if so, or if not, are there other changes that you would like to make in our education system?
Thank you very much for this question. This is one that's important to me. I grew up in a family of teachers. My father was head of the teachers union for over 25 years ago, and public education is very near and dear to my heart. It is an essential core offering of the provincial government, and one that also helps build not only citizens of tomorrow with the critical thinking skills to live as productive citizens, but also that helps advance social cohesion and helps a diversity of people live together. Now, I'm proud of the work of the BC NDP that we're already doing, with certainly more to do to hire additional teachers and teaching assistants. What I've been hearing on the doors is that people would like classrooms where we can ensure that an entire range of students with diversity of and a diversity of learners can be supported. We've also seen strong investments to new schools, seismically upgraded schools as well. And there's simply more work to do to continue to build the educational infrastructure, to be able to engage more teachers, to be able to provide supportive working conditions for teachers, and to be able to build homes, crucially, that teachers and other education professionals can afford in the neighborhoods that they work in. We've seen with the BC Conservatives a track record with John Rustad, who was part of the previous government, that saw really a public health education system that was decimated in terms of tearing up teachers' contracts, increasing class size, and there's certainly more work to do that the BC NDP is committed to doing to ensure that all students can thrive within their schools. And I know we must keep going forward with the BC NDP's commitment to building a strong public education system for all.
Christine.
Thank you, Susan. I've seen some of the challenges that balanced budget requirement actually puts on schools, because when I was talking to the folks at Oaklands about their childcare program, I was really distressed to hear
that there's a situation with one building that was actually, applied for money with the school board to build this to provide childcare necessary, for those kiddos. And the requirement for balanced budgets, of course, means that school districts are told, we'll monetize every asset. Make sure that you can make your money, make sure that you can pay for all of the programs, but, do it off of your assets as much as possible. So the lease is set at such a rate that they are actually struggling with their core operational funding and looking at, can we even continue to supply childcare in this space, in this building that was put together with provincial money to make sure that we can have childcare. So we have these terrible quandaries that are placed on school districts when they are given these mandates. And this is something that, I've seen since I was in high school, going and, protesting potential cuts to music programs. Government after government has seriously underfunded education when it is the most important thing that we provide, because setting up our children for the future and for the economy that they can build to support everything that comes after us as well as us, to put it really bluntly, we need to make sure that we have a top tier education system. And it's something that BC Greens focus on. It's the first plank of our platform that we released because it is so central. And we want to make sure that education funding, not only do we not worry so much about, balancing budgets during austerity, but we actually increase funding dramatically so that kids have access to music, kids have access to art and sports and technology, because it is shocking to me that when my niece was attending Victoria High School, in her grade 9 chemistry class, part of her curriculum was cutting pieces of paper out and using a glue stick to stick them into a binder. And the reason for this is because they do not have technology tools. They have a couple of laptops in the entire school that kids are only allowed to take out for a short period of time because there aren't enough for everybody. And if you have your own device, you're not allowed to bring it from home because that wouldn't be fair. That's not the only way we can create equity in our schools. BC Greens are proposing that we provide technology, that we provide laptops to every student in grade 6 and in grade 10, so that we are setting kids up for the future. We also want to make sure that mental health resources are available for students, so that school psychologists as well as educational assistants are there for every kid.
Thank you very much. So back to Nina then to start, Christina, to start this one off. Nina and Christina. All right, so this one is about food security. In the 1950s, Vancouver Island produced 85% of our food supply. Now we have to import 90% of the food we need. How can we increase our local food supply, yet protect our agricultural land reserve areas? Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Susan. When it comes to challenges like affordability, which I think is something that my family struggles with as well as so many people that I talk to, food security is high on the list because once people have finished paying for the roof over their head, there often isn't very much left at the end of the day. We're seeing food bank usage go way up. We're seeing mutual aid groups like Community Food Support doing wonderful work on the ground, like gathering up food from participating markets like Fairway Market, like the Root Cellar, redistributing food to people who really need that additional food security. The work of neighborhood houses like the Quadra Village Community Center, putting so many programs in place to help people with food security. But this is something that we need to take a much bigger approach, because we shouldn't be relying on charity, and we shouldn't be relying on people scraping together when these are systemic issues. I have had the privilege and honor of learning from some of our agricultural specialists a little bit about what's necessary to create food security. And right on the edge of Victoria Swan Lake, we have the Blenkinsop Valley, which is a wonderful agricultural gem that we really should be preserving, promoting, and protecting. And along with protecting the agricultural land reserve, we know that farmers need water to grow food. And yet we don't have agricultural water reserves that go along with land reserves. We don't have water set aside for farmers to use.
That's something that BC Greens wants to make sure that we address urgently. We want to make sure that farmers who have the land to farm also have the water that they need to grow crops. Right now, we often find that industrial uses are prioritized. We've heard from farmers who, they missed doing some paperwork, and so they were told to shut off their taps. That doesn't work for people that are trying to provide food for people here in our community. I've also had the opportunity to listen from other people working on this issue across Canada, because we actually have a lot of people that want to address this challenge. Learning through Climate Caucus, I got to learn a little bit about what the District of Waterloo was looking at with food security, and some of the things that they looked at were how we can create more things like cold storage in our communities so that when we do have food collection and redistribution, it lasts longer, so that people are able to access healthy, nutritious food for longer in their communities. The same can go with food preparation and food storage facilities, so that in the event of some disaster where we might be cut off from the mainland, we know that with natural disasters, our transportation routes can be cut. We want to make sure that we have adequate food security for everyone on Vancouver Island so that we are safe and fed where we need to be.
Thank you very much. And this is such a key issue for our communities. We all need to have secure food and also just general supports that we need whenever we need them. And now the BCNDP has been making real advances in terms of tackling affordability generally, which benefits all people and their broad needs. And so we've seen cuts, of course, to MSP premiums, cuts to the insurance rates. We've seen affordable childcare, and childcare halved for most people in this province. This has turned childcare from what was truly a second mortgage into something that people can readily afford, and to ensure that they can work as well and support their families. We've also seen a commitment to broadening food programs, ensuring that there's healthy lunches and snacks in BC schools, which is vitally important, we know, for students to learn. There's also been initiatives to strengthen the supports for farmers, and we know that all of these initiatives related to affordability, supports for healthy meals in schools, and also supports for farmers that improves food security will be at risk, unfortunately, with the BC Conservative government. We have seen a vision that really stands to benefit the top 2% and leave the others behind, and really decimate programs and services related to food security and so many other initiatives that would be simply devastating for this province. I think there's more work to do, but we're starting to see, I think, real developments and real progress for British Columbians, and we're committed to carrying on the work.
Thank you. We're getting a little bit into public safety and transit now, so we're starting with you, Nina. As we're encouraging people to use more active forms of transportation and buses to reduce the need for cars, how can we minimize the increasing conflict between all types of road and trail users, pedestrians, cyclists, scooters, skateboards, wheelchairs? Over to you.
Thank you so much. I rely on the bus. Many family members rely on public transit, and of course we want expanded offerings, safe offerings, efficient offerings that make sure we can get to point A to B in a safe way. And we've been proud of the work of the BCNDP and the work they've done to on really transportation infrastructure and investments in transit that have been sorely neglected by John Rostow and the government that he was part of before our BCNDP. We also have taken initiatives broadly that advance public safety, and this includes hiring law enforcement and also tackling some of the more systemic issues that contributed to street disorder, including on transit. And this means more robust mental health services here for people that are suffering from addiction at various points in their addiction and recovery journey. and also work that we're doing on the housing to again get at the systematic, the root causes of poverty and addiction and mental health that are often the contributing factors to street disorder and to disorder on public transit. And we know that the BC Conservatives are proposing cuts to all of these initiatives that are vital to our safe communities. And we are committed to doing more work and to really ensuring that the BC Conservatives will not have a chance to decimate supports for public safety. And we want to keep continuing to build communities that are safe for us all.
Just confirming, it was transit and road complexes. Great, thank you. Okay, I think that transit is an extremely important part of our community, and I know because I don't have a driver's license. I grew up using transit as my major mode of transportation because my parents told me that we only had one car, and so I wasn't allowed to learn how to drive on it. And then BC brought in a graduated driver's licensing program, and that seemed really unattractive, and the bus was pretty easy. I really like reading, and so it's always given me a great opportunity to get around, but it's always been in the back of my mind anytime you have to move or pick a job or figure out how you're going to get around. One job that I took, I thought it was gonna be great because it paid more, and then I realized that I was spending 3.5 hours on the bus every day. And that really didn't work. And I know that it doesn't work for so many people in our communities. It's the reason why my mom doesn't think that she can use transit, because she doesn't look at it as being something that's gonna work for her life. And the BC Greens understand that we need to make transit work so that people will use it. And so that's why we're proposing making transit fast, frequent, and free. We need to take away all of the barriers for transit use so that we can build up a robust public transit system to go along with a robust public transportation system that makes sure that we take in all modalities. We've been spending $800 per capita on roads when we spend, $200 and some odd dollars per capita on buses and only $50 on things like pedestrian walkways and AAA trails. We have the Lochside Trail and the Galloping Goose Trail that are beautiful AAA trails, that there are plans to do things that will help to reduce conflict for trail users, like widening the trails, making sure that they're divided when necessary, making sure that there is better lighting available. And we understand that when we get people into transit, it will actually reduce road conflict because it will get more people out of cars. So the people who need to use cars won't be facing the same kind of congestion on the roads. They won't be facing the same kind of issues trying to get from point A to point B. And that means that people who need to use cars, whether that's, their own personal vehicle, or if they want to save themselves $10,000 a year, jump on the bus and get onto transit, or, conveniently use a car co-op and all of the other many ways that we can get around. Electric bicycles, electric scooters. We know that these are all different types of vehicles, and we need to make sure that the roadways work with all of these vehicles so that every user, all access and abilities, can use these paths safely.
There's a follow-on question from one of our members, and you sort of answered it a bit, I think, Christine, already. How will you and your party make public transit more affordable, more frequent, and at capacity so there are no full buses passing by?
Thanks, Susan. Well, I think that our slogan for transit is fast, frequent, and free. So that's what we want to do. We want to make transit fast, frequent, and free, and we want to do that by adjusting how we spend money. We spend a lot of money on roads and highways. We do, and some of that's necessary, but we also understand that widening roads does not change traffic congestion. It never has. We actually need to change modalities in order to be able to change congestion patterns. So we need to be able to rework how we spend money in the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. I laugh when people in the community call it the Ministry of Highways, but we really should stop calling it the Ministry of Highways, and they should be focusing on all kinds of transportation and infrastructure and spending money accordingly instead of, like I said, wildly out of proportion. $800 per capita on roads, $50 on all access trails and pedestrian paths, $200 and some odd on transit. If we adjust these figures with
attention to road patterns and use patterns, but making transit fast, frequent, and free for people will help get people into transit, out of their cars, and help with all of our transportation as well as climate issues.
Repeat the question.
I
Thank
sure
you so much.
can. How will you and your party make public transit more affordable, more frequent, and at capacity so no more full buses are passing by?
Thank you so much. And it's funny, I also have no driver's license, so hence my reliance on transportation. And it really is such a key offering and a mode and something that makes the lives of all citizens easier, especially those seniors and also kids as well. And the BCNDP has offered free transportation, free transit for students, for kids 12 and under, which is an important achievement. And enhancements to transit, which includes which includes free transit for students and also more faster and more routes, are something that is a key part of the NDP's commitment and something that contrasts really greatly with the BC Conservatives, who have promised to slash infrastructure spending and to roll back some of the important developments that we've made. We know that there's been a deficit of transit and other infrastructure upgrades here in BC that are the legacy of John Rustad's past political party, and we're committed to righting the ship and continuing the investments in infrastructure, including, of course, transit, essential to so many people. There's more work to do, but we're moving in such an important direction and committed to maintaining this path forward.
So we've had 6 questions. We've got 5 more here. So I don't know if anybody needs to stand up or take a break or take a sip of your water. And then as soon as that's over, then we're going to turn the mic over and invite you to pose your questions. So next question then, we're starting with Nina. There is an alarming increase in homelessness, drug addiction, brain injuries, and mental health issues, which are causing stress on our first responders, police, and community services. How can we manage these social problems and improve public safety?
Thank you so much. And this is also a question I'm hearing a lot at the doorsteps. Concerns around the unhoused, around those struggling with addiction, and around mental health supports. We are very fortunate to have citizens that not only care for the well-being of themselves and also their families, but care for their broader communities and want to ensure that supports are available for those that are most vulnerable. And so these are complex challenges, of course, and there's no easy solution. But the BCNDP has been taking action to address these challenges and their root causes. In terms of housing, I've spoken already about a number of initiatives, from the speculation tax to Airbnb restrictions, to building middle-class homes, to ensuring that rental buildings stay rental buildings and are not converted to more luxury apartments. We're taking action to address housing and expand really the range of housing, including supportive housing and lower income housing for all. On the addictions fronts, this again is a very complex issue that requires complex, multi-pronged approaches. These include harm reduction and safe supply. We need to be able to save lives and protect lives. We need to ensure that there is also mental health supports. Not all, of course, people with addiction struggle with mental health, but often there are concurrent issues. And you also noted in your question the prevalence of brain injuries, which is a consequence of the toxic drug crisis. And so we really need to be able to expand offerings for cases that really demand complex care, and that includes for people with the concurrent issues of mental health, addiction, and also brain injuries, that they have access to secure care when they need it and when they're not able to access it themselves. We see with the BC Conservative government a bit more of a one-size-fits-all approach to combating issues with law enforcement, and also a recovery model that doesn't include a safe supply and harm reduction that are so necessary to save lives. And we really need all of these things, including harm reduction, safe supply, access to affordable housing, safe and secure housing, and also mental health supports that are so key to having safe societies and societies where people that are struggling, where people that are vulnerable can access the care that they need.
Thank you. Christina.
I'm really surprised to hear that we're supporting safe supply and harm reduction so strongly when I had somebody walk up to me when I was sitting at a meeting and tell me that somebody working within the Ministry of Mental Health, that they were extremely disappointed that the BC NDP had decided to cancel their pilot project on decriminalization and safe supply. These are necessary prongs of a multi-pronged approach to dealing with this issue that is touching everyone in our communities. You know, we talk a lot about concentrated areas like Pandora and street disorder, but this is something that is impacting people in pockets all across our community. When I go and knock on doors in Oaklands, right beside the park, there's a beautiful little housing development with a nice little play area for the kids that's right by the fence of the park. And unfortunately, the parents there don't really feel safe with their kids playing in that playground anymore, because on the other side of that small chain link fence, there is a small community of unhoused people who are, dealing with some mental health issues, some addictions issues, and, there is some safety concerns around that community. And at the same time, I hear these people be extremely compassionate and saying, we recognize that these people are in a community and are trying to take care of each other, but at the same time, it certainly shouldn't be in a park, in a field beside my kid's playground. We see this not getting better because the root issues are inadequately addressed when we keep people in poverty with disability rates that are way below the poverty line, when we see rent supplements for seniors under the SAFER program that don't come anywhere near to supplementing somebody's rent and making it affordable. We also know that it's not just people that are unhoused or experiencing homelessness that are dealing with addictions and also dealing with the opioid crisis. Toxic drugs are killing people across our community. It's not just in the streets, it's also in condos, it's in townhomes, it's in dorms. It is the man who came up to our office and told me about his niece, who is just a casual drug user with her boyfriend. They got some things from friends. And these stories mean that every day I run into people whose lives have been touched and whose family members are now dead. And that is too late. We can't help people then. So we really need to make sure that we are providing people with support when they're ready. We know that involuntary care does not work because 96% of people go and basically immediately relapse. We need to make sure that mental health supports are available for people when they're ready, when they ask for it. We know that that's the successful model, and we need to make sure that these supports are available widely across our community in ways that work with communities.
Thank you, and back now to Christina on the economy. If population growth projections are accurate, this region will be facing significant costs for building housing, infrastructure, schools, and community services. What role do you believe the provincial government should play in addressing these costs?
Thank you, Susan. So it is expensive to build all of these things. It's expensive to build housing, and it's expensive to build transit, and yet it is exactly what the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce, as well as chambers of commerce across British Columbia, are asking us to do, because our economy is crippled by the fact that we don't have places for people to live when they have a place to work. I've talked to people who aren't able to move here to complete a job. I heard an example this morning at the Victoria Vital Signs Report presentation of Harbour Air, where Harbour Air is a great example of what we could be doing, the future of our economy. This is a company that is saying, we want to actually have electric aircraft and we're going to electrify our entire fleet, and then we're going to be able to sell electric aircraft to the entire world, which is fantastic because we know that aviation is one of the major sources of transportation emissions. And yet they can't get mechanics in Victoria because if they try to hire somebody, they can't find a place to live. So our economy desperately needs these investments, and the business community is asking for government to make these investments. And BC Greens know that these are the foundational pieces for creating a strong and resilient economy. A strong social safety net that catches people is vital to making sure that we have a resilient economy, as well as making sure that we keep things on a sustainable path. A constant growth model doesn't work in a finite system, and we live in a finite ecosystem. We need to make sure that we stay within those bounds, and there is so much potential here in British Columbia to do that because we have an extremely educated population. We have a technology sector that is looking for the right kinds of policies from government. You know, BC Hydro got out of the business of asking for clean power for years when they decided to build Site C Dam. As soon as they put out a request for proposals, they had 3 times the amount of projects coming forward that they needed. And these are projects that are being brought forward by First Nations communities, by local businesses, by Canadian businesses, by people based here in BC that can take advantage of all of the clean energy opportunities that we have here in British Columbia. We have seen ourselves for a long time as hewers of wood and, you know, miners and people that take resources and ship them away. And it is time for us to tell a new story about BC's economy. A story that is built on the knowledge economy, a story that is built on investing in education and a social safety net that keeps people able to live here and prosper, and a story where we focus on the future and the things that BC can provide and provide to the world proudly.
I think we all in our daily lives battle with the infrastructure deficit left by the previous government, whether that's transit, roads, healthcare, schools, housing, which is why the BC NDP's plan to build the infrastructure that we need and their commitment to taking action to ensure that we build the infrastructure we need is so vital to addressing the challenges of the present, but also building a BC where we can all thrive. We've seen advances on the housing front, accelerating the building of new homes for a diversity of incomes. We've seen the first new schools in so many years. We've seen everything from the seismic upgrades at UVic to a brand new middle school at the Cedar High Middle School. We've seen a Clean BC Action Plan that has investments in building a strong, clean, and green economy, one that will protect the environment while also creating new jobs. All of these advances are wonderful, but there's so much more work to do, which is why I think the BC Conservative government presents a vision that is so very risky for British Columbians. We will see cancellation of crucial infrastructure projects, a rollback of some of the work that we're doing to build new schools, build new hospitals, and build new homes, which are so essential to a strong economy and a vibrant British Columbia. So I believe we've been working hard, more work is coming, and we must stop the Conservatives who will roll back these crucial advances in infrastructure so necessary for British Columbians.
Three questions to go, so get your questions ready. So in July 2024, the BC Business Council report stated that the number of employees in the private sector grew at an average rate of 0.6% in the past 2 years, while the number of employees in the public sector grew by an average rate of 5.2%. The number of employees in the public sector is 20% higher than the pre-pandemic trend projections. Do you think the rate of growth in the public sector is sustainable?
I think we've seen a growth of our economy, which is quite astonishing given the post-pandemic realities that BC and Canada and others across the world face. We've seen the highest growth in wages in Canada. We have seen a growth of private sector jobs as well, and the Clean BC Action Plan is advancing critical projects that help advance work and advance jobs and good jobs for people here in British Columbia. In terms of the public sector, a lot of the growth of these roles is tied with tackling the critical deficits in infrastructure that I've just spoken to, and really ensuring that we can build a British Columbia that has the services and the programs and infrastructure that all British Columbians need. We're turning a corner on these things. There's more work to do, but we cannot afford when we're turning the corner to go back. And I know that there's such a risk with Rustad and the BC Conservatives in terms of rolling back the investments on housing, infrastructure, on building the clean economy that will not only challenge us economically, but also challenge our citizens in terms of their day-to-day access to programs and services that are so essential for all of us, especially the most vulnerable.
Thank you, Nina. Christina.
So the public service is a really big and broad area. And, I've heard the concerns of BC Business Council and actually, of other business people looking at it and saying, we've basically stalled out on private sector growth. It looks like that's not going anywhere, and yet the public sector is ballooning up. And some of that is a lot of management that seems to be going in. We are building bureaucracies after bureaucracies. I talk to people that work with the health authorities, and there are, I think, 40% of nurses in administrative roles instead of providing healthcare directly. It seems like it could be. There's room for improvement. When I hear a news story that talks about how many managers get paid thousands of dollars to sit around a meeting, so you're like, this is not what the private sector is doing. The private sector is getting rid of meetings. The private sector is, changing the way that they do things and not just adding in more layers of management to try to fix problems. And it is an approach that I disagree with. I don't think that that's the way to get good results. At the same time, the public sector writ large also includes teachers and nurses and other people that are employed by the private sector. So I think that we need to be really careful when we talk about this, because we want to make sure that we are still investing where we need to invest. We want to make sure that there are social workers. We want to make sure that there are teachers. We want to make sure that there are healthcare professionals across the province that are well supported and that don't have huge ranks of bureaucracy on top of them that create a lot of red tape, maybe create jobs, but don't maybe create outcomes for people. I'm distressed by seeing the Ministry of Health budget balloon from $20 billion to $33 billion when I don't really feel like I'm getting better healthcare outcomes. And maybe we're hiring more people, but we need to make sure that the hiring that we do matches getting outcomes on the ground. That's what I would really want to focus on by getting into the legislature and taking a look at where we can find ways to deliver services more effectively. This isn't always about being the most efficient. We do need to make sure that there's resiliencies in place, but we really need to make sure that services are delivered effectively, that we take the best methodologies, and that we are not constrained by just adding on and building. Something that humans are actually very bad at is taking away, even if taking something away might get us a better result. Sometimes taking something away will get us a better result, but I want to make sure to examine that on a case-by-case basis and not impact people that are providing services on the ground in a negative way.
Thank you. Two to go. In November of 2022, BC had a $5.7 billion surplus. But according to the Finance Minister's 2024-25 budget projections, the BC deficit is projected to be 7.9 billion. Do you think this is sustainable? And if not, what can you do to reduce the deficit, you and your party?
Thanks, Susan. It is distressing to hear government announce that we're going to spend a lot of money without getting results. So when I see the deficit ballooning up, I tie it to those policies and programs that we've seen a lot of money being spent and we're not seeing the outcomes on the ground. There are a lot of things that we waste money on, and some of the things that we subsidize that we shouldn't be subsidizing. The thing that continues to boggle my mind is why we keep paying fossil fuel companies to make profits off of something that causes pollution. These types of inefficiencies do not serve us in any way. They don't serve us economically, they don't serve us environmentally, and they don't serve us in that it's a bad waste, it's a bad use of money. I mean, we could be spending our money in a lot smarter ways. So when I look at the deficits, and I don't think that it's sustainable to just keep spending and spending and spending. You know, we want to make sure that we're fiscally responsible. We want to make sure that everything that we do, every solid proposal that BC Greens make is going to be costed, so that when we put a proposal forward, you know how we're going to pay for it. And we're going to pay for it by being more efficient with taxes. And that means being really clear on keeping a tax on pollution and making sure that polluters pay, because that's a way that we can make sure that we have the revenue to do what we need to do. But we also want to make sure that we keep an eye on the future. For instance, I'm cognizant of the fact that the CREST system that so many of our first responders rely on has long been funded by a gas tax that is actually decreasing. So we need to make sure that these vital services don't get left on the wayside, while we're still making sure that we are responsible fiscal managers. You know, we can't push these things forward into the future forever, but we do want to make sure that government makes the smart investments that are going to bolster our economy, so that we have affordable housing for workers, so that people have food security, so that their families are taken care of, and so that we can have a prosperous and thriving province. And that means, you know, being fiscally responsible as well as making those smart investments.
I think I and so many others with the BC NDP has been very proud of our track record balancing the budget throughout the challenges of the global pandemic. And we have the lowest debt to GDP ratio of all provinces in Canada, the only province with a AAA credit rating. So now though, however, with the challenges that we face in this post-pandemic economy marked by high interest rates and global inflation, we need to address many of the deficits left by the previous party, and also by the cracks in services that the pandemic laid bare and that exacerbated. And so when we talk about delivering these programs and services that people so desperately need, that means building new schools, hiring more educators, building hospitals, keeping the hiring of doctors and nurse professionals that are starting to make a difference. On the door, I'm meeting people that have been attached to doctors in recent months. We're starting to see real progress on this front and more work to be done. And I think that we also heard that David Eby just yesterday announced that we're on track to connect all British Columbians on the Health Connect registry with a family doctor by 2025, the end of 2025. So I do think these investments that we're making to ensure that there are robust programs and services are addressing the challenges that we all face, the challenges that your questions speak to, the challenges that we're seeing on the door. And there's so much at risk with an approach that John Rustad has said he would take in terms of cutting all the services and programs in the building that we so desperately need. And so BC NDP is committed to keep doing the vital work to make smart investments and to ensure that we build a community that supports all people, especially during this time of such great challenge.
Thank you. And I'm sure you were waiting for this one, it being our last question. It's about the environment. We're in a climate crisis and a housing crisis. We need more suitable homes for people, but we also need to protect the environment. Our urban tree canopy and biodiversity conservation helps to mitigate the negative effects of climate change. How can we best find the appropriate balance between densifying our housing and preserving and retaining and restoring our natural areas?
And I think this is really one of the fundamental questions of our time and our generation, and the responsibility of all British Columbians to be able to address. And we're very proud with the BCNDP's Climate Action Plan, which identifies targets and is on track to reduce carbon emissions by 40% by 2030. We're building a clean, sustainable economy that will both protect our environment and also create new jobs. And I think there are visions that of British Columbia that on the one hand might support the climate and addressing climate change at the expense of the livelihoods of British Columbians, and another that advances economic projects that at the complete detriment and at the risk to important climate initiatives. And so with the BCNDP, there's a vision and action that is committed to tackling climate change, to building a clean economy, and to making BC a leader in terms of economic initiatives that will both help us reach our targets and also help create jobs. There is incredible work that we've done, and certainly more work to do, but what I do know that we cannot afford the vision of the BC Conservatives that is built on the vision really of a leader that questions climate science and the possibility of fighting climate change. And we know that here in British Columbia, like all global citizens, we have a responsibility to tackle climate change. We need to keep doing the work, and we have on offer a vision that will roll back commitments to fighting climate change, remove protections to old growth forests, and also not work constructively and productively with First Nations to build a vibrant British Columbia where the environment is protected as our people's work and jobs. And we keep building a BC where people can thrive for generations to come.
I get to be the BC Green candidate now and talk to you about the environment. So the BC Greens put making Clean BC part of our confidence and supply agreement with the BCNDP in 2017 as a key part of the agreement, because we understand that moving away from fossil fuels is absolutely essential, and that we really need to move to a clean economy for an economic as well as environmental reasons. It is distressing to know that we have actually missed every single climate target here in British Columbia, and that our emissions are still rising. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we apparently think that we can still extract methane and keep that as part of a clean plan. I'm not sure how that circle squares when methane pollution is extremely bad for the climate, and we need to tackle that as urgently as we tackle carbon pollution. On the other hand, when it comes to our beautiful green spaces, here in Quadra, Cedar Hill, when I go knocking on doors around the Cedar Hill Golf Course, the people tell me how much they love living here because of the natural beauty, as well as all the ecosystem services that we are provided by trees, by watersheds, and by all of the green spaces around us. We understand that we are going to need to build housing, and when I talk to people, they are looking at it as an exciting opportunity to not only preserve our existing green spaces, but also to expand them. For example, the Friends of Bowker Creek Society have a wonderful 100-year plan for daylighting Bowker Creek, and this is something that I was a little emotional to find out about, because my grandmother growing up in Oak Bay must have absolutely loved Bowker Creek, running through the neighborhood. And yet when I was growing up in Gordon Head, I had no idea that Bowker Creek even existed. Going to the University of Victoria, I had no idea that the headwaters were at the clubhouse, and that's why there's such a beautiful water feature up there, is it's actually part of our natural watershed. And one thing that we can do with that creek, and to, as we've said, improve and expand green spaces as we develop, is to daylight it, to bring it up, and to allow it to provide us more ecosystem services like flood mitigation. When we have more natural watersheds, we have natural assets that allow us to have additional kinds of mitigation that don't rely on us having to, tear up and rebuild built infrastructure all of the time. So these are smarter ways that we can look at climate mitigation. We also want to make sure that we can protect other parts of our watershed. Bowker Creek isn't the only one. The Friends of Cecilia Creek Society, Colquitt's Creek, Victoria Swan Lake as its own natural jewel. We have so much to protect and preserve here.
That completes the questions that our association has put together. Can I get just a quick show of hands? How many of you would like to ask a question? So we'll get to as many of you as possible. There's somebody who acts as a runner, run the mic around. Okay.
Stand up and stretch for a minute.
Okay, we'd like to stay close though, because it takes too long to get going again, and we have 44 minutes left. We have to end at 9 p.m. sharp. We're under school orders. When you are asking your question, we're asking you to brief. Say brief within 60 seconds. Please, get your thoughts together. Keep your question to 60 seconds or less. Okay, ready to go? Okay, who's first? Who's Ann? First.
Thank you. Nina, this question is for you. You said a few moments ago that your NDP government will have a plan where everyone will be on the doctor's registry by the end of 2025. So with that, am I to assume that your plan through your party is an 8-year plan to get a family doctor?
I appreciate your question, and really would underscore that the challenges our healthcare is facing have been long in the making, that relate to the underinvestment of the previous government, and also the effects of the global pandemic, where we've seen a healthcare challenge and weaknesses in healthcare laid bare and also exacerbated. The shortage of doctors in BC is not unique, of course, to British Columbia. We've seen a scarcity of doctors across Canada, and we're making outstanding progress in terms of hiring new doctors, new nurse practitioners, speeding up the process for ensuring that those with foreign credentials can practice here. And these are challenges, but we're making incredible results. And really, we're proud that here in Vancouver Island, we have the highest number of hires, more than 175 physicians who are being attached to tens of thousands of patients. So there's incredible work, important work, essential work being done, certainly more work to do, but we know we cannot move backwards at this time, and we can't look forward to a government here that underinvests in healthcare. This is one of the most challenging issues of our time. We need to ensure that everyone from our youngest and oldest has access to primary care whenever it's needed, and the BC NDP is committed to tackling this challenge. We're seeing results, and the recent announcement that we can expect all people still waiting to be attached to a physician or a nurse practitioner by the end of 2025 is certainly moving in the right direction, and we cannot stop now.
Okay, that question is directed to Nina, but we want both candidates to have an opportunity to Swan.
It always bothers me when people promise things way past the next election. But, you know, I really want to focus on what we can do now. We know that we've hired more family doctors, and I have heard that we have, you know, more family doctors now per capita in Victoria than many other places in the province. Unfortunately, we also have an aged population that has a far greater need for doctors and for care than other areas. So even though that greater capita capacity exists, we're still not finding people having that access to primary care. I have talked to many people on the doorstep that have been attached to a doctor, and then about 12 months later that doctor leaves, and then they go back on the list, and then they get attached to another doctor, and then that person leaves. And so they're having difficulty accessing continuity of care. Even when people are getting attached, they're having difficulty accessing that continuity of care. And I actually heard from one of our volunteers a distressing story, because she's been on the list for a long time, and was actually got an email saying that she had been attached, and so great, she was off the list. And she contacted them and went, "What are you talking about? I'm not attached to a clinic, I don't have a doctor." And they said, "Oh, well, you know, a nurse practitioner at this urgent and primary care center looks like a test result was sent to them and they accepted it, and therefore now they're your practitioners." Well, actually that isn't how that works. So unfortunately, we're not seeing that this system is being successful at creating the longitudinal health care, that long-term care with the same set of healthcare professionals that we know actually leads to better healthcare outcomes. That's why the BC Greens want to make sure that we implement the Dogwood model, where we focus on community health centers, a model that works, a model that is proven, a model that works here in British Columbia, and a model that there is too much bureaucracy and red tape right now for doctors to be able to practice. We need to change that. We need to get rid of a lot of the bureaucracy and red tape in medicine. We need to make sure that healthcare professionals can practice medicine first and foremost, rather than being stuck doing paperwork.
Thank you. Thank
Can
you.
everybody put their hands up so I can see who else wants one, Bob?
Okay, folks, we'll get to as many as possible, because we're limited in time.
Thanks. Running the province of BC is a huge, complex task. It's a multi-billion dollar, so I forget what the budget is, but it's probably 75 billion or so. It's the largest employer in the province. It probably has the biggest single impact on the economy of the province of any enterprise, if you wish, in the province. And I'm wondering what skills, what experience each of you bring to the table so that you can contribute to running this great ship of state.
Thank you. I think we're just going to alternate now. So that's a great question, and I thank you for it. I have worked at a lot of different jobs over the years. You know, while I was spending 12 years working on political campaigns, after I finished at UVic, I decided to try my hand at organizing other things as well, and so that led me into working at a variety of different offices. I had the pleasure of working at a multimodality office that was very close to the Royal Jubilee Hospital, where we saw a lot of nurses coming in on a regular basis, and I got to hear a lot about the difficulties that people had with the healthcare system, while also helping people to access services, helping them with their insurance challenges, making sure that they got through the system smoothly so they were able to get help at the end of the day. And you know, that is not, fortunately as an administrator, it's sort of a skill set that you can take a bunch of different places. So I've also worked as administrator of a real estate developer, working out building purpose-built rental buildings out of mass timber out in Langford, and so that was an educational experience in and of itself, and taught me a lot about the foibles of for-profit development and some of the challenges that developers face in trying to build good things in our community. And I've also recently, actually last October, as an administrator, helped to launch Marigold Law Group with my husband, who is the lawyer of our law group, and we've actually just hired a new associate, and learning how to start up a small business from scratch as the administrator, making sure all of the paperwork is done. So, you know, if that form is wrong, if they've given you the wrong phone number on it, if you can't get through to the right department, figuring out how to solve that problem, how to make sure that we actually get to the end of the process so that we have a business license, so that we are all appropriately registered with the CRA. I've taken that experience, and I see that it's very similar to the work that's done in the constituency office, I've had the opportunity to work in Adam Olson's constituency office in Saanich North and the Islands to understand more about the work that it takes to serve people in the constituency. And it is much like the work that I have done in my professional career. It is work helping people get through systems that may or may not be designed for them, helping them to find the right person to talk to, advocating on their behalf, and making sure that we get to the result at the end of the day. So that is the experience that I want you to bring to the constituency office to serve you there. And in the legislature, I look forward to examining things, taking the approach that we need to get into the details, that we need to make sure that we are focusing on serving people and on what is going to be the absolute best for people here in Victoria's Swan Lake.
I think it starts really early for me. I mentioned that I was from a household of educators, with a union leader as a father, and really the values of education, social justice, and helping others permeated our home, and no doubt inspired my career in nonprofit leadership, in education, and in anti-racism education. And I've had the privilege of working with and meeting a lot of nonprofit leaders here as I'm engaging with the community. And nonprofit leaders, for those of you who are one or might know one, are really come with a diversity of experiences and skill sets, from managing teams, professional teams, volunteers, working within complex governance structures, fund development, managing, in my case, multi-million-dollar budgets, bringing millions of funding to support the work of an organization, and working also with a diversity of stakeholders. So in the case of the institution that I've had the privilege of leading, BC's Holocaust Museum, that means working with educators, with students in the K-12 system, with parents, and also with elderly people. We work really closely with Holocaust survivors, some of whom need considerable care and access to social services. So I have a great background, and I would say skill set in terms of dealing with a diversity of people, and also making sure that people from diverse backgrounds, a lot of the work that I've done has been in partnership with various cultural community groups, from Indigenous communities to recent refugees. And I think through this work, I've gained really skills that are vital and foundational to the work of an MLA. One of those, of course, is listening deeply and compassionately to the lived experiences of others, being able to represent and advocate and fight for a diversity of interests and experiences. So I'm really deeply committed to bringing those skills of deep listening and really steadfast, tenacious work, ensuring that I'm able to represent the interests of all constituents in Victoria Swan Lake. I don't take this role, it's such an enormous privilege, and I would be committed to representing that diversity of residents, including, of course, those that don't vote for me. I think it's vital that we can work with and advance the perspectives of a diversity of residents, and I'm deeply committed to doing that.
Excellent. Go up here.
I was hoping you'd see it.
Hi, thank you. I've been on the front lines of mental health here for about 15 years. You know, I've had my hands covered in blood. I've saved lives. I've been assaulted many, many times. I can tell you, over the last 15 years here, it's been a crucible of disaster. I agree that there should be programs for these people in the streets that are disenfranchised. However, where these programs are placed, there tends to be a fallout around these areas here where the communities go and suffer. What can we put into place here to go and help mitigate some of that while still provide those programs. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I believe Nita, you're up first. Last speaker first.
So I hear you about really the challenges of mental health for individuals, within families, and within communities as well. And this really demands a multi-pronged approach, which is the BCNDP's approach to these issues that include mental health and rapid response teams that can deal with people and assist people with acute mental health crises whenever those happen. We also need to have, I think, earlier interventions and programs such as the Foundry here in Victoria, which connects youth to services related to mental health supports and addictions when they're small problems and before they become big issues as well. And for very complex cases and those overlapping cases where there's mental health issues and addiction issues and brain injuries that have been, we've seen increase with the toxic drug crisis. We really need approaches that it can ensure that people get dignified, compassionate care that protects their own safety and the safety of communities around them.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I have seen the difficulties that have happened, especially in the Burnside Gorge neighborhood, as many things have become concentrated, especially during the pandemic when we tried to solve a lot of problems really quickly. And that caused a lot of problems instead. We had neighbors being drastically impacted. I live on the edge of Quadra Village. North Park is another area where, we've seen services concentrated, and with those services, lots of safety issues in the area. I go to public meetings and I hear people telling me the same sort of things that I've had happen at my house. People wandering through the yard, random things being stolen, random things showing up, people obviously in distress. And it is something that is a real challenge. And it's something that I have taken a look and seen where there are projects that are doing better in our community, because I think that's something that we need to recognize as well. There were a lot of mistakes made during the pandemic with how we tried to effectively put people into whatever kind of housing we could find. There's been a lot of learning that's come away from that as well. So, for example, in the Gorge Tillicum neighborhood, they have supportive housing there on Albina Street, and it was a bit of a challenge initially for the neighbors. It was very different. There have not been a lot of supportive housing projects outside of the city of Victoria, so this is very new. And they learned to work with the service providers there. And the people there that looked at the situation and said, okay, well, the things that are the most important for the neighborhood are the things that we need to focus on, and that's making sure that we don't have a congregation of people happening outside. So if we have people coming outside, we need an ambassador who is going to be able to move them to an appropriate place to receive services. And this is a model that we have seen work. Again, the work of my leader, Sonia Burstenow, that she's done in Cowichan. It's an experience that's happening in all of our communities. And what they found in Duncan is the exact same thing that was happening in Victoria and Pandora Street. Is you had services, you had people concentrating and congregating around services, and then the public safety issues that arose from that. And what they've decided to do instead is to create a model where there is effectively a network of communities, so that you have small housing communities like Tiny Town in North Park, but like Tiny Town version 2, because version 1, North Park residents had a lot of challenges. And when it was brought back for version 2, it's been a lot quieter. The neighborhood has been a lot less impacted, so I think that it's really encouraging to know that we can learn from our mistakes, that we can learn from the experiences that we've had in neighborhoods, that we can learn from success stories like Albina Place. I actually went there to pick something up from Facebook Marketplace, had no idea until I arrived where I was. So we can solve these problems.
Going back to the health situation. When I moved back to Victoria about 8 years ago, I was astonished naturopaths are able to do in this province. Naturopaths are better at guiding us in preventive medicine than they are in crisis medicine, reduces costs. I'm wondering what either one of you or both of you feel about including naturopaths in the public health system.
That is a great question. I don't go to a naturopathic doctor, so I don't have a lot of experience with naturopaths, but I do understand that preventative health is something that we need to focus on. BC Greens believe that preventative health is actually where we can make the most impact. It is the place where we have the best outcomes foreseeable for people. So when we have a robust preventative healthcare model, that's where we're going to see the most robust outcomes. Where we want to make sure people have access to healthcare, we should make sure we have access to healthcare, and I want to make sure that the healthcare service providers are appropriately regulated so that the public is safe, regardless of the kind of medicine that they practice.
This is the first time I'm actually hearing this question, and it's an excellent one, so thank you for it. And certainly, we're interested with the BCNDP of strengthening healthcare supports to provide quality healthcare whenever that's needed. I have to be honest, I would need to do more research and more learning about the possibilities for naturopaths within the public healthcare system. Regulation and safety are of course important, and so too are a range of healthcare options that are of course preventative and also responsive when health crises do transpire and when illness, when people are ill. So it's something that I would be really interested in learning more about to see how we can continue building a healthy society where people can have access to healthcare whenever they need it, something that we know is at risk with the BC Conservative vision.
Okay, back to the side. Can we have a hand, please?
Where's the hand on this side so I know that?
Just in follow-up to the topic of healthcare, help speak in terms of the questions and conversation about healthcare. Okay, I gotta talk right with my mouth. Anyway, just in regards to some of the acts that have been proposals that have gone through, the bills that have been passed with this majority NDP government in the last couple of years, quite speedily, I might add. Without like 600-page Health Professions Act that was decisions were made on that over a very short period of time. I'm wondering, is there an opportunity going forward for, as elected officials, to share the conversation about some of these really important bills that are being passed, that are expensive, that involve health professions all across the board, many of whom have been amalgamated now through this Bill 36 change. And the new administration has come in, that government-appointed administration coming in. Louder? Okay. So that's my question. Can there be more dialogue and sharing of information with the voters about these things? Thank you.
Who's last? Nina, I think you're up.
No, thank you for that. And certainly, when it comes to decisions, these are of course complex decisions made in response to complex problems that involve consultations with experts, with advisories, and that are really and multi-partisan discussions that involve bringing forth the solutions that work for British Columbians. I, of course, think there's a need and an opportunity to ensure that citizens have political decisions that are transparent and explained to them as well. So I think part of my role as an MLA is really to be a bridge between government and the constituents here in Swan Lake. And so that's something that, if I'm privileged to be elected, something I'm committed to doing to ensure that any questions are answered, ensure that people have the information they need to be able to understand the work of government that is being made in the best interest of all British Columbians.
Well, it's really hard to know if decisions are being made in the best interest of all British Columbians when we don't even allow us to talk about the bill before we pass it. And this is something that we've seen time and again with this NDP majority government, is that they invoke closure. And just to be clear, closure means we're tired of talking about this, so now it's time to stop. And government gets to say that whenever they want, and they have been extremely willing to use that over and over and over again, even when we are making big changes. 600-page piece of legislation. And that probably wasn't the only one that was proposed that day. When I was talking to Adam Olson, he said during the last session of the legislature, they had 5 bills proposed the first day, all of them large, weighty, and extremely important, and they were going to start debating them the next day. And if that doesn't give you a lot of time to seriously consult with your community, I'm not sure if that's the system that we want. So we've seen that this is, the creation of new administrative bodies, forcing people like legal professionals into unions against their will, all of these things being done with a real lack of consultation, a real lack of discussion, and a real lack of respect. Thank you. A real lack of respect for our democratic ideals. It's just really distressing to see that this is the level that we have come to in the legislature, and it's something that we need to change. And this is something that we actually know can change, because we do have multi-party ways to discuss how we deal with each other in the legislature, and this is some of the work that gets done in committee. So, I've talked to our leader, Sonia First now, about some of the work that she's done in committee, and she is extremely focused on making sure that we have a robust, strong democracy here in British Columbia. And some of the suggestions that have come from that committee, I think we need to follow up on. We should stop seating people by party. We should start seating people by region. We should start seating people so that they have a chance to talk and collaborate more instead of less. And these are things that we know everybody has agreed to in the legislature already. So they should be things that we can implement day one in the new session.
It's been troubling to me and many British Columbians to see the provincial government support the treatment of the Wet'suwet'en people who've been opposing fossil fuel development in their territories. How would you, if elected MLA, advance DRIPA, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People Act, as an individual, not just what your government would do, but what would you do?
Okay, go ahead. I think Christina, you're up.
Thank you. The Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act is a first step, and it's only a first step. And it is a way that we can start to make a path forward. It was extremely important for the BC Greens because we made sure to put it in our confidence and supply agreement with the BC NDP to make sure that this piece of legislation would be passed. I have had the privilege and honor of having Adam Olson as a mentor and being able to speak to Indigenous people in my community about the kind of relationship that we want to have moving forward. I really want to support the work of the Victoria Native Friendship Center. I recognize that for Victoria, Swan Lake, as well as for our entire region, that is an extremely important organization, and the work that they do needs to be better supported. So that's something that I would take myself as an MLA to do, is to raise up their work and to ask them what more we can do and what are the best ways that we can support that work. When it comes to the issues of land use, you mentioned Wet'suwet'en, the actions there are indefensible. Indefensible that we have police going out and violating people's human rights on behalf of industry, and an industry that is not a good and healthy one for our province. Adam was part of, as I've said, we have these committees in the legislature that do really good work that we need to follow up on. The committee in the legislature that worked on the Police Act and on what could be done to revise the Police Act has a lot of really specific recommendations, including creating a provincial police force so that we don't have the RCMP, we don't have CERD. So these are things that we need to follow up on. I am extremely dedicated to following up on that work and to making sure that we follow through instead of just all sitting in committee, agreeing what needs to be done, shelving the report, and leaving it for another day.
Thank you very much for this question. One of my dearest mentors and friends is Chief Robert Joseph, who heads up Reconciliation Canada, and he published a memoir titled Nomkip, which is We Are One. And certainly this vision for our shared responsibility to care for and uplift one another is central not only to reconciliation, but central to the work that I have done as a nonprofit leader, as an educator, and with the perspective that I would bring to my work as an MLA. There has been important work that the BCNDP has done in terms of advancing reconciliation, which is a vital and ongoing process with more work to do. And I'm concerned that the BC Conservatives and John Rustad would take us in a step in really the wrong direction in terms of relationships and engagement with First Nations that builds strong societies, strong economies of benefit to all.
We're almost out of time, but one last question on this side. Sir.
As an old person, I had to go to the washroom, so if somebody's has to answer this question, just ignore me. But my question is about the carbon tax. And I'm disturbed, as actually a long and lifelong NDP voter, to find that David Eby would be willing to step back from it. And that seems a really retrograde step. So I'd like to know what each candidate thinks about the value of the carbon tax and how important is it for us to keep. Because many of my friends think it's one of the best and the fewest of the best things that government's done. And to step back from it seems a disaster, quite honestly, to me.
Thank you so much for this question. Actually, this is one thing we can give the previous BC Liberal government credit for, that the carbon tax was passed under their auspices and certainly has provided a vital piece of our plan to combat climate change. Recently, the BCNDP has said that in the event that the requirement is eliminated by the federal government, we will also revisit this. This has been in response to feedback that we have been hearing time and time again around the challenges of affordability that British Columbians are facing. At the same time, we have doubled down on our commitment to make big polluters pay and doubled down on our commitment to advance work on the Clean BC Action Plan that ensures that we make big polluters pay, reduce emissions, and also build a clean economy so that we can continue to protect the environment for generations to come. I am very, very concerned that the BC Conservatives will roll back the essential work that is happening in terms of combating climate change. And we simply cannot let that happen, which is why I'm really proud to work to advance the work of the BCNDP, which is the party that can stop John Rustad and his destructive vision that will compromise our beautiful British Columbia that we all value and hold dear.
The carbon tax is a smart policy because it does what it's supposed to do. It deals with carbon pollution in an efficient way. And economist after economist has said that this is the most efficient way for us to deal with the problem of carbon pollution. And it was in 2008, under our BC Liberal government, that BC decided that we don't actually have to wait for anybody to be climate leaders. And that was under Stephen Harper, so it wasn't like the federal government was, on board in any way, shape, or form. So when I hear that, federal conservative leaders, not even a prime minister, but just a leader of a party, is going to be enough for BC to back down on climate action, I'm not sure why we need to. When we have a proven track record of being a leader, and after we put that policy in place, we actually saw clean technology companies start to come here because we sent a strong signal to industry that this was the direction that we were going to go. At the same time, we're hearing about affordability challenges, and it is just shocking to me to hear that this is being mentioned when the whole design that the BC Liberal government put in place was to make sure that this was going to put more money in the pockets of British Columbians who need it most. The vast majority of British Columbians receive more back in their pocket from the carbon tax than they pay, by design. If we take that away, that is literally going to take money out of people's pockets. That is not good for affordability. When we talk about making big polluters pay, that is exactly what we want to do, which is why it was so distressing to see every single MLA, both BC Liberal and BC NDP, stand up and vote repeatedly to give large tax breaks to polluters, to LNG methane producers. These are pieces of legislation that actually stymie our climate action. These are things that need to change, but the carbon tax is an efficient policy. If we don't have the carbon tax, the other options are actually more expensive and less efficient. So I don't know why we would want to come up with some other regulatory system when economists say this is the best way to deal with carbon pollution, when the system that's been designed is one that increases affordability for people. And if we actually manage to close the loopholes, we might be able to actually have our emissions go down.
Regretfully, we're out of time for any more questions. It's time for the closing remarks. We'll start with Nina.
Thank you very much, and I so appreciate people's time and engagement in questions this evening. I'd be really pleased to stay here afterwards and engage with your questions and answer your questions one-on-one. I think you've heard this evening that we're at a crossroads here in British Columbia. We have with the BC NDP, which I'm so proud to be running with, a people-centered vision for this province. One that centralizes the well-being, security, prosperity of all British Columbians in all of our plans. This is at risk with this provincial election. With John Rustad and the Conservative government, we have a vision that would see cuts to crucial programs and services, a rollback on cost savings for families, and a cancellation of programs and projects that are starting to make a real difference in the lives of British Columbians. Again, I think we all want the same things: to be able to access quality health care when we need it, to be able to rely on strong supports and programs, and to be able to build communities where people can thrive during their entire spectrums of their lives. This is why the BC NDP offers such a compelling people-centered vision that contrasts so significantly with the vision of the BC Conservatives, and one that I believe puts the risks and what is at stake in this provincial election into sharp focus. If I have the privilege to be elected and to be representing you as neighbors, as constituents of Victoria Swan Lake, I promise to listen and to faithfully represent your concerns, your lived experiences, and your interests in the legislature. I have been a fighter for my family, for the community, and for really all British Columbians, and I'm determined and so proud to right now be taking this fight to, with your vote, the BC legislature. I thank you again for your engagement, for your commitment to building strong and caring communities, and I look forward to being able to work for you going forward. Thank you all again for your time this evening.
I'm really glad I'm not a Conservative right now, because I've heard a lot about them tonight, but actually we're talking about Victoria Swan Lake, and Victoria Swan Lake is an extremely progressive riding. I've told you all, I've been knocking on doors since 2015, and it was not always that progressive. I actually was at a coffee chat recently with Frances Littman, who was the federal Green candidate that I was working with in a Esquimalt Senate seat in 2015. And she reminded us that somebody spat on her at a doorstep. And I was shocked because the worst thing that has happened in this election so far has been, no thank you. Oh, one woman yelled that she wouldn't vote for me for $1 million, but that was funny. So that was okay. But what I have heard is that the riding is getting more and more progressive every time that I go and knock on somebody's door. In 2020, we had 83% of people voting for a progressive candidate. In the past 3 elections, it's been Greens and NDP 1 and 2. This is the choice that we have to make, is who is going to be an effective representative for you in the next legislature. It is an extremely interesting election where it is looking like it is going to be difficult for any party to form a majority government. And in a minority government situation, BC Greens have shown that we are extremely effective at getting our policies, our ideas into legislation and into policy. We've banned big money in BC politics. There's no more corporate and union donations. Individuals are limited. Nobody can buy an election by themselves or even with just a small group of their friends. We've reformed professional reliance to protect communities and watersheds, and yet we still know that there are places where watersheds are not protected fully, where there are communities that are suffering the impacts. We have passed the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, and yet, as we've mentioned here today, that's only a first step. This is a way for us to open up other foundational pieces of legislation so that we can re-examine this relationship and have true reconciliation here in Victoria, Swan Lake, and across British Columbia. And BC Greens do that while keeping government honest and accountable. We are extremely effective at that, and I am ready to work hard for you in the legislature and in the constituency office, in the streets and in the community. I am ready to advocate for you to make sure that I follow through until we get a result that is good for people here on the ground, that we can focus on our well-being, that we can make this a good place and a good future. So to keep BC progressive, this election, it's time to vote BC Green.
We do have time for a big round of applause for two candidates too. The Quadra Cedar Hill Community Association is looking for fresh new people with fresh new ideas. If you are interested, please see Susan. She's dying to find somebody else. I want to thank Reynolds School again for hosting us. I'd like to thank the Quadra Cedar Hill Committee. Again, the candidates, thank you so much. And the audience, thank you so much for coming and participating in the audience.